It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. And today I have a fraud expert. It's been a while since we've interviewed someone who's an expert in fraud, but Kelly Todd is going to join us today. She knows more than just information about fraud, but here she is. Okay, Kelly, I see you. Let me get you on here. With our exes is rampant, and as is financial abuse. And so I'm really, yes, it worked. It worked, and I see you. So I'm really excited to have you on, Kelly, because people are always like, "What do I do? My ex is financially abusing me," and then fraud is a whole new level. So before you even formally introduce yourself, can you answer like what is a fraudster mindset? Like, is there a way to tell if someone's going to commit fraud before we even get to know them? We're always talking about red flags.
Well, here's the thing. There's not necessarily a way to know if they will, but it is, I think, when we're talking about divorce, we're really talking about financial warfare. I mean, definitely gets, and one of the things that we see so often is where there is control. And in so many marriages, including mine, one person has control of the money and the other person just doesn't have as much knowledge. So where there's control, then they can, there's a rationalization that happens that's like, wait a second, I have control of the money. It's my money. It's rightfully mine. And so therefore, I'm going to do what I want to do with this money. And then the intimidation starts and the deception starts. And I mean, it goes from there. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Kelly, can you now officially introduce yourself and say what exactly you
yeah.
do?
So I'm a forensic accountant by trade. And what that means is I have spent my career helping people, helping corporations, anytime that someone suspects financial fraud, I'm the person you call to come in and investigate it. And so I have been on the front lines investigating fraud for years. Absolutely love it. I know that sounds horrible if you're on the receiving end of that, but or on the receiving end of the financial betrayal. But one of the things that I'm at this juncture in my career that I realize that I haven't made the impact that I really want to make. You can only make so much impact one investigation at a time. And so I am spending my time now, although I still have my day job investigating fraud. I am on a mission to help empower others who are going through some type of major financial event in their life and helping them before it happens. I've spent my career on the reactive side of that. And so I am just trying now to raise awareness, get the word out there, help others before financial deception actually becomes part of their story.
All right. I'm thrilled. I'm like, this is going to be so helpful to our community, which is all people dealing with betrayal and someone trying to take advantage, whether it's during divorce or post separation. So this is so relevant. Could you first even get into, we hear like financial abuse, but what is financial betrayal?
So it's really somebody taking advantage of you and your money. It's the deception. It's the, just accessing money and taking it from you. Just the financial betrayal.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned also how now you're on this mission. How does fraud awareness impact preventing it? You really can. I mean, there's specific things people can do to protect themselves.
Yes. Absolutely. And one of the biggest things in fraud awareness, just being aware helps prepare you to, one, recognize that it could happen to you. The biggest mistake that business owners make, that individuals going through divorce make, is somewhere in that relationship at some time was trust.
Mm.
And maybe there is still to some degree, but it's the person on the other side, the one who's going to betray or one who does betray, betrays that trust and exploits it. So just being aware that it can happen to you, and there is a lot of evidence, especially in corporations that provide fraud awareness training to their employees, that incidences of fraud actually are reduced within that organization. Now, I know that's not necessarily relevant for your audience, but it's the same. It's the same concept.
Mm-hmm.
Aware that it can happen to you, you're more likely to pay attention to signs that it may be happening.
All right. So here I'm in a loving relationship. Are you saying that I should be cynical?
I am. No, no, you need to be aware.
Okay.
You just need to be aware. So in your loving relationship, does one person have more power with the money, or more access to the money, or more knowledge about where the accounts are? Because fraud is hidden. And so, it hides in the shadows. So the ability to, if only one person has access to the accounts, the minute that something starts going wrong, it becomes just natural to well, gee, if I don't tell them I'm making this transfer, then it's okay.
Mhm.
But it is just having the knowledge of what exists, and being aware.
Yeah. So that's really interesting that trust is almost like a mistake, to have like full trust in someone without ever thinking, just in case I have to make sure I have access. But are there other mistakes that you've seen in divorce in particular that people make besides trusting the person that you are married to or in this long-term loving, supposedly, relationship?
Yeah, I think that just carrying forward from that trust is not having the knowledge and not asking the questions, and being aware of where your money is, or of how much your spouse makes,
Mm-hmm.
or what does it take to actually run your household. There's oftentimes the spouse that we're helping doesn't have any knowledge, and just literally is, their hands are tied, and they just don't know, and that is, it's devastating.
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking, it's bringing me back to more than 10 years ago while I was still married and my ex had a job and real estate and I was working. And it was like, I felt like we had all this income, but somehow there was never enough money. And I never really looked until during the divorce process. And it was like, wait, what? Like talking to the accountant, like, where did this $65,000 trade come and just disappear? And then finding out that was a habit or whatever. I mean, what are some other red flags
Well,
before looking at an affidavit in the middle of a divorce that might signal financial betrayal or fraud?
you just made a super point, and that is that you thought he was making enough money, you're making enough money, but there was never any cash. There was never enough money to do things. That is a red flag. That's when you need to start asking yourself, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, one of the things that I often see is, sometimes a little bit of knowledge can not be the best thing in the world, because then you maybe take it too far. Well, wait a second, why don't we have this money, and where is it? Well, no, let's back up just a second and ask questions. You have the right to know,
Mm.
but come at it from a place of curiosity, as opposed to a place of threat, and blame, and that sort of thing. But if you start to suspect that there's a problem, if you have access to your accounts, get access to take access, go in and look at them, look for unusual transfers, look for, and when you see transfers, where is the money being transferred to? Is it something that you recognize? Is it another account that perhaps you don't recognize? And so that's indication that there's something else you either need to ask about, that sort of thing. So it, trust your gut, And if you think that there's something that's not right, start to ask questions.
Hmm. And then pay attention to your gut when they're answering and often not
Yeah.
telling you the truth. So as you said that about looking at things, you're also making me remember something from a while ago that I heard from a professional saying, look for numbers that are round, like round even numbers that are being transferred out possibly on a regular basis, because everything has tax, unless it's like a lawyer's retainer.
Right.
Are you familiar with that? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Any round dollar amount. Think about it like this. If you go to the gas station and you try to put $20 even in your gas tank, how easy is that to do?
Yeah.
It's not right. It's going to be 20.
Quick, quick.
So I say that to, yes, anytime something is, especially if it's big round dollars, and the more zeros in it, the more suspicious it is. So if it's $2,000 or if it's $20,000 or, but yes, round dollars, because it is, you're right. From the tax perspective, you don't go and check out at the store that it's very rarely ever a round dollar amount. So yes, very suspicious activity in the round.
I think at like Trader Joe's, you could win a prize if you have like $100, right? Because it's so rare. Yeah. So, all right. So like those round dollars and anything else that people should keep an eye on.
Yeah.
And not just in the relationship, but even say during a divorce process where it's like something just doesn't look right with these numbers.
Yeah, well, I would say, some of the newer things now are like cryptocurrency or the use of social payment methods like Venmo or PayPal, or so it's very easy to move money out of an account to those other accounts, and then you don't see those types of transactions going from there. So
Mhm.
there's that intermediary. One of the things you want to that can be helpful, especially if you don't have access, is pay attention to what's being said at the dinner table or
Hmm.
at the days. What are people in your family talking about? And then when you, excuse me, when you find yourself in this situation, um, and it can be very, very helpful to write down what you know,
Hmm.
because you're well aware. Divorce is a very emotional situation. And the more that you can take that emotion, remove the emotion from what you know about the financial situation, write a chronology of things that have happened from a financial perspective in your marriage.
Like a
Uh,
financial journal.
yes, yes.
Wow, that's such a
Uh,
great idea. I've never heard that
Yeah.
before.
Well, it's very helpful to professionals like me who, when I'm helping, I'm listening to your story. Sometimes it's difficult to hear through or focus in on the things that really are going to get me to understand your situation and to help move the needle from the financial perspective. So, but that written journal, if you will, can be very, very helpful. Think about if you had a traffic accident, you're in a high state of emotion. You don't necessarily remember everything that happened, the way that it happened, but when you start to write it down, some additional things may come to you. And
Hmm.
so, again, the chronology can be very helpful too, simply because, and in this situation actually recently happened in our organization. A divorcee was had written down all the chronology of things that she knew, and even though the chronology was actually off significantly, the mention of certain things when we were looking at the financial statements or excuse me, the financial documents and bank statements and that sort of thing, and going through them, suddenly it triggered a question for us to ask for additional information, and ultimately identified a $4 million loan that was earning interest. Well, it was an incoming to the marital estate, and the spouse that we were working for had no idea. And we're talking about major income that the attorneys didn't know about either. So again, it just goes back to that written journal was very, very helpful to help us pinpoint some things that might not otherwise have shown up.
Wow. Oh, great story. Um, are there any other things that people can do to prevent it? Like I love the idea about, paying attention and just writing the chronology. But say you see it and then you're like, it's happening. But how do we get before that point to prevent it?
Well, I think the prevention is inserting yourself in the process. So inserting
So
yourself
just the
in
knowledge.
the financial happenings in your marriage. Just be in the know. You might not be handling every transaction and you might not be reconciling the bank statement on a monthly basis or whatever, but be in the know. Ask questions. If something is off, ask.
Okay.
Trust your gut and insert yourself into the process.
Okay, so now we jump past the marriage, it's the divorce. There's all kinds of games with financial discovery. Someone is hiding assets and income. What should someone do in that situation where they're like, I know my ex is not being honest, and we have to figure out, I should have transparent, full disclosure to figure out how to make a really good decision. Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So, well, for when we're involved in a case, we are typically working for attorneys have hired us, and of course, then there's, they have certain powers that I don't have to be able to get to access to information. But if whatever information that you do have access to, if you start to follow that, usually there are some footprints in the information that you have that will identify other accounts, things of that nature. And if you need to, ask to hire a forensic accountant or somebody that can help wade through all of that financial information to identify. Well, and it could be, oftentimes we're hired just to help because a lot of spouses just really don't know what all is there and what should be available for spousal support or custody of the children and or that type of thing. And so being able to, we will can assess what should be there on an annual basis and what should be available for support. But through that process, oftentimes identify hidden accounts or things of that nature. But as far as getting at information, if you have a nugget on whatever you've got, start asking questions there. And something I didn't mention earlier that can be very helpful, especially as you find yourself, um, on the path of divorce, is if you do have access to accounts, online access especially, log in and download everything that you can when you can before you perhaps lose access to the
Mhm.
information. Because it for a couple of reasons, but one, just being able to get access back as far as you can, to be able to build that financial picture, um, can be very, very helpful.
And that can save tons of money.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So I remember this comes up a lot with our clients also, where people will say, my ex has offshore accounts. And when I've asked forensic accountants, they're like, we can't actually get to that. And some stuff with crypto, it's like hard to, but what you said about having that nugget, I think is helpful because they're supposed to show if they have it. And if they won't, just the fact that it's there says something to a judge,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. And is they'll say, oh, well, this crypto exists, but and just like you said, you might have somebody who says, well, we can't get to that. And that part perhaps is true, but that crypto had to be purchased from some account
Mhm.
that offshore account had to be created from some account. Now, yes, there could have been cash, but then it could be, well, number one, where did the cash come from? Sometimes it's about what's not there.
Mm-hmm.
Another range about as much as it is about what is there. So, for example, I just a simple example, if you own a home and you have a mortgage, then you should see a mortgage payment coming out of your bank account, at least a bank account, on a monthly basis, right? Well, if it's not, then that's an indication that there might be another account.
Mm.
So, that I don't mean to take that away from the idea of cryptocurrency or some, account on the offshore or what have you. But again, it's looking for the nugget that indicates that another account may exist. Then you can start the discovery process on that other account. But if it's just, oh, I just know it exists, and so oftentimes we get that,
Mm-hmm.
that's not enough. We've got to have an indication that it does exist and can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, so like some kind of evidence, even if you don't have the amounts and whatever, the history, but to say, here's this number, why hasn't the other side produced the information?
Exactly.
Okay. Another thing I just thought of too is in terms of writing an agreement. So how important is it? Well, before I ask the question, I'll just give a little backup. So during my own situation, my ex refused to submit a lot of the financial discovery, and it took a year and so expensive. My lawyer's like, okay, what we're going to do is in the agreement, we're going to say that these amounts of alimony and child support are based on the amount that the defendant has put on the affidavits. If it is ever determined that there's been more money and income than what's put here, then everything can be readjusted. And that saved me moving forward, because that protective language was very clear and allowed me to open up the door for a modification when, of course, I knew that money had been hidden, instead of just saying, oh, it is what it is, we can't get it, and we just have to finish. Have you heard of things like that? Because I thought my lawyer was so brilliant.
I have not, but that is fantastic to know, because again, to not have that kind of language in the agreement, it goes to it goes to that trust factor. It's like, okay, well, this is the best that it can be.
Right.
No, if you know, or if you've got the gut that there is something else there, then that forward thinking language can be invaluable.
It really was. I mean, and I don't think you know this, Kelly, but I represented myself for years through dozens of court appearances, through financial stuff, and a lot of it had to do with that. And that language really protected everything, because the other lawyers kept trying to say, no, we can't reopen it. And it wasn't reopened only because that language was in the initial agreement. So I think for those of you listening, it's very important, if you suspect fraud, to have your lawyer put some kind of protective language in there.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I would even go as far as, even if you don't suspect fraud, there's just that protection. There, believe it or not, there are things that can happen that aren't fraudulent.
Mm-hmm.
But that's hard to believe in this kind of situation, for sure. But that language certainly cannot hurt.
No. No. It was just like a couple of sentences. So Kelly, I'm trying to think, is there anything else that you want to mention that I haven't asked, that I haven't thought of? And if not, then tell people how they can find you.
Well, I don't think that there's anything that you haven't asked. I just say this: just remember that fraud is hidden in the shadows. And so the more knowledge you have, the better off you are going to be. So ask questions. If you just trust your gut and ask questions. You can find me. I'm not real active on Instagram, but I am on LinkedIn. And also my firm's website is forensicstrategic.com.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. This has been really helpful, and I love learning new things that I've never heard of before, even after interviewing many professionals. That financial journal idea is brilliant, especially when you broke it down to talk about moving the emotion out and how helpful it can be for dealing with professionals later on. Because again, we all want to save time and money and energy, and that's how your brain stays focused when you say, here's my documentation, instead of just telling the story. And with trauma victims like all of us, it's like you kind of meander, and there goes the clock still charging you for it.
Well, yeah, and let me say too, because, and I'm sure that you have lived in a lot of frustration thinking that people aren't listening to you. It is very emotional for you, and it is very personal for you. It's not for the professional. And so they just, to one, like you said, to help save that money, very important thing to do. The more you can focus on what the professional needs to know, and while I can try to get that from you, that written word is just so much more helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. Someone's asking to list your information, so I'll put it. It's going to be later on our podcast and YouTube channel, but I'm going to put your hook on Instagram, and I'm sure if you check, if someone wants to direct message you, you'll look and answer them.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and for all these great tips.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.